Right, now we're live. No
Hi.
screeching. Good. Right, I can hear you. You can just about hear me.
I've got it to work now, so it's working.
That's always a bonus on a
Yeah.
Friday morning. Thank you, Anna, for joining me on a Friday morning. I have got your book right here, and I can't wait to ask you all about it. But welcome to Another Door podcast.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
How did the Penguin live go? I know that you did one of the Career Boost sessions.
Yeah, really well, really well. Lots of people there. Lots of people seem to be thinking about next steps, career changing, what to do, taking the leap, all of that. So yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, it's a weird time for people. I think that lockdown has definitely unruffled a few thoughts, and people are now thinking, "Let's go it alone." So this book's brilliant timing. Anna, can we get to know you a little bit better? And perhaps just give us a short introduction, and then we'll get stuck in to what the book's all about.
Sure. So I'm Anna Codrea-Rada. I'm a journalist, podcaster, and now also author. My kind of I'm sort of a journalist first and foremost. That's what I'm trained in. That's what I've been doing for the last 12 plus years. I write about business, culture, and technology. And I went freelance 4 years ago this summer, and it was a result of redundancy. So very much had a kind of lost my job and thought it was the worst thing in the world, but actually changed my career for the better. So yeah, I wear, as a freelancer, I wear lots different hats, constantly changing my hats. So but that's the kind of very sort of top line of who I am and what I do. And yeah, just wrote a book called You're the Business, and it is basically a handbook for freelancers and the nuts and bolts of how to actually work for yourself.
It really is. I only got it a few days ago in the post, and I've been trying to crack through it. But it's like a manual. You do literally go through and go, "Oh no, I didn't do that. Oh no, I didn't do that. Oh, this is why." But no, it's brilliant. Let's talk about that redundancy then. I mean, a lot of people, obviously, Another Door is about losing your job or career change. A lot of people are going through that awful moment of losing your job, but wondering, is this the moment to do something different? Could you share a little bit what happened with your thoughts and at that moment?
Yeah, so my redundancy was very dramatic, I suppose. It was it was a number of people who all lost their jobs on the same day. So it was I was working for a media company, and I was an editor, and I was editing one of the many verticals that they had. And the business decision was taken to close some of those verticals, including the one that I worked on. So I lost my job along with a whole number of other people. I think a couple of hundred people got made redundant on that day. The decision was taken from the American HQ, and in America, things are done very quickly. So I got called into an office on a Friday afternoon. I actually was Skyped by my boss's boss because I was in London and they were in New York, and it was, okay, you're being laid off. I didn't realize that actually it was happening to lots of people at the same time. I thought I was being fired, and it was very much kind of, you've got 2 hours, hand in your laptop, get off site and don't come back. It's the kind of, that's sort of it's the American way of doing it. And so it was very much, went into work on a Friday, came out without a job. And I actually made the decision to go freelance that weekend. And my mum took me out for lunch, and she was kind of talking about, take your time, think about next steps, find another job. And I was just like, no, I've got another job. I'm not unemployed, I am self-employed. And then that Monday I opened my laptop and I was like, right, I am a freelancer now, and this is what I'm going to do. The only reason I was able to make that decision so quickly and to move so fast on it, was because I had been thinking about working for myself for a long time before that. And it was actually a very gradual process that started with me just really struggling in my career, and at that point in my career, not being able to find internal jobs that actually spoke to me and that I wanted to do. moved around a couple of times, tried different things, and I just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And then it kind of started to creep into my mind, oh, maybe actually you are better suited to working for yourself. And it was a very, very slow process that was going on. But by the time I actually got made redundant, in my mind, I was thinking, I was already making a plan to how I was making my exit strategy anyway. And I was kind of making a plan to eventually quit my job and go freelance. What I will never know is whether I would have been brave enough to do that had I not been pushed. So I always kind of say my only regret is that I went freelance because I lost a job rather than being brave enough just to do it on my own. But it was, it might look like in that moment, I just made that decision really, really quickly. Whereas I know other people who took a lot longer to work out what they wanted to do because they hadn't actually entertained the possibility of working for themselves. But yeah, on the actual day that it happened, I remember it was so many emotions. I was really shocked and confused. I think I was also kind of quite ashamed and sort of just felt really bad about it. Like I said, I thought I was being fired. I thought it was just me. And I don't know if it's, I can imagine it's really not nice to have to let someone go. And I don't know if it was me not being able to compute what the person was saying to me, or if they just weren't saying it very well and they weren't explaining to me that, you know, the whole site has been shut down and you and other people are being let go. However they said it, in my ear, what came into me was, you, Anna, are fired and you have to leave right now. So it's a really, really unpleasant process. And it definitely kind of lasts. The stuff it brings up really does really kind of stick with you. And I definitely have made decisions or I've done things in my freelance career because I'm trying to prove that I can do this on my own. And it's kind of like, well, who am I trying to prove it to? Like, it's because it was no kind of like, if there is an individual involved in this whole situation, I didn't actually know who that individual was because it wasn't my boss. It wasn't my boss's boss. It was some decision made so high up above me that it's a faceless person that I'm so angry at. But it's been a really, really interesting kind of, it's definitely, for me, my redundancy is my career sliding door moment, and it just set me off on a whole different path, and one that I'm much happier with, one that I feel like I've achieved things that I didn't think I was ever going to be able to achieve, and it just really kind of turned everything around for me.
I love that about that little voice in your head saying, "I'm going to prove to you," and then like, who is this you? I think we all kind of do that a little bit. And then when somebody asked me that, they were kind of like, do you feel, you know, really still angry for that person who fired you or made you redundant? And I was thinking, same as you. I was like, well, that person didn't actually take the decision. They were just as in the same boat as me. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, yeah, look, I've got a book, but I don't actually know who that's to. It's just the general kind of thing. But it's important energy that kind of the revenge energy, or that energy to say, right, I'm going to prove that this isn't kind of me and it's not going to define me. So it is an important energy to sort of recognize and direct. Anna, I want to ask you, do you think anybody and everybody can start their own business?
Yes and no. I think that anybody can. It's whether they should is the question. I'm a creative person. I've got a English literature degree, and then I've got a journalism master's degree. I don't have I have an A-level economics, but other than that, I've got no business skills, and I never imagined myself wanting to learn business skills, or I kind of thought that was something that I wouldn't be able to master, because I went through the career decision making at university surrounded by people who were going into the professional services and, you know, management consultants. And it's kind of like the training was the sort of the urban myth was that, oh, they train you in Excel so that you get so good that you don't even need to use a mouse. And that's just something that's just not for me. And so I came into this without having any business skills, and I've worked it all out, and there's so much out there, and that's also why I've put so much of it into the book. But the question is more whether people want to do it, because really the thing that takes a long time to get your head around, what takes a long time to get your head around, is that working for yourself, freelancing, does not mean doing your job just without a boss. It's just a whole different way of working. So when I imagined what it would be like to freelance, I was sat in an office and I was really miserable, and I hated being in the office, and I hated the office politics, and I hated being told what to do. Or no, not being told what to do. I hated being told what to do just for the sake of following orders. I'm the kind of person where I need to have a reason. If I'm given a reason, I will execute, and I agree with the reason, I will execute. But if I'm just told to do something just for the sake of it, I just can't. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm a journalist. And so if I go freelance, that means all I'll have to do, all I'll be doing all day is just writing. I'll be at home. No one's going to bother me. I'm not going to be in pointless meetings. I'm not going to be traveling to the office. All I'm doing is writing stories, pitching and writing stories, and that's it. That's not what freelancing is. Freelancing is you are the entire business. You're the business, in the sense that it's that whole office that I worked in, which I think had 1,000 people in it, that is then just condensed into you. You are the boss and the employee at the same time. This kind of narrative of, oh, be your own boss, I think it's a bit misleading, because you still have other people that you have to answer to, and you are also your employee and the boss at the same time, and the head of finance, and the head of marketing, and the head of sales, and the head of HR. All of these things, it's all rolled into one. And some people just don't want to do that. There are other people who are just built in a different way. They like being in offices. They like being told what, they like the kind of the comfort of being part of a bigger team and not having to take on the responsibility for everything. There are people who absolutely just hate finance stuff altogether. They just can't find any way to find it interesting, or just want to do it. And kind of something that I have found, people come to me and they say, oh, I'm thinking about going freelance. And I'll say to them, are you being pushed into freelancing, or are you being pulled towards it? Because they're two very different things. If you're unhappy in your job, the solution isn't always quit it and go freelance. The solution is figure out what is it specifically that you don't like about this job, and what do you need to change? It may be that you just need a new job. You might need to make a kind of sideways step. It might be your boss. It might be all of these things that actually the answer is not quit and go freelance. So it's I think the problem is that we're just not taught to think, what do we actually want our careers to look like? We're taught to think of job titles. I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a journalist, I'm going to be an architect. We're not taught to think, how do we want our careers to fit into our lives? What do we want our lives to look like? And how do our careers relate to that as a part of it? Because, there was no freelancing booth at the careers fairs that I went to. I'm pretty sure there still aren't any freelancing booths at careers fairs. Self-employment, at least when I was growing up, was kind of something that if you can't get a real job, you work for yourself. So it's all of these things. I know that's really has changed kind of since I was going through all of this in the last 10 years. But still, I think that is the issue. But for anyone who thinks, no, this is for me, I want to freelance, then yeah, they can do it, and they can learn everything that they need from books like mine, but also just from other, there's so many resources. What's been really interesting for me is that actually some of the books I leaned most heavily on when I was starting out were books like Cal Newport's Deep Work. And I've got kind of a collection of like Accounting for Dummies, and then books like that, and kind of like books about like burnout and all of those kinds of things. But yeah, in answer to your question, anyone who wants to do it, they can learn how to do it. But it's being really honest with yourself about whether this actually is for you.
That's brilliant. And I love I do think it's about getting to know yourself really well in a way that you maybe haven't before. As you said, in your job, you knew what you didn't like, you knew what you wanted to escape from. You probably knew what you were really brilliant at as well, but that doesn't mean it translates going alone as well. And getting to know yourself is so important, isn't it? And knowing what you want out of it is brilliant. In the book, you give really simplistic kind of frameworks to sort of getting started. Could you share just a little bit of, I mean, there's a whole, the whole book is that, but a couple of things, if people are just getting started with their business idea, what would you say, where to start?
I think it is really important to lay solid foundations, which is something that I don't think I maybe did, partly because because it was a sudden decision, and I wasn't sure if I was going to stick with freelancing. I kind of suspected I probably would, but I didn't know. So I kind of to me at the beginning, it was, I'm just going to see how this goes. And that's absolutely fine, because I think that's also like kind of start with where you like meet yourself where you're at. That's generally great advice in all aspects of life, but I think it also applies to freelancing. That if you are coming to it as a result of redundancy, it's absolutely fine to sort of think of it as like, I'm going to test this, and sort of this can be a great big experiment. But I think start laying good foundations. So I made myself a promise at the beginning that I'd been in editing jobs before I went freelance, and I really wanted to be a writer. So I made myself a promise that in all of this freelancing lark that I was going to do, writing had to be the main focus of what I do. And I've pretty much managed to keep that promise to myself. I mainly, pretty much all of the stuff I do is writing based. I kind of even extend that to podcasts, because there's a lot of research, and it's like I write it all down and then talk it. But anyway, so just be really clear from the beginning that what you actually want to get out of this, and what are some of your kind of like, not rules, but your intentions. So just go into it really intentionally, how do you want your days to look like? What do you want your focus to be? What are the things that are really important for you? And also, again, it's kind of goes into what is so unique and special about freelancing. It's the ability to do things that you can't do when you work in-house. So for me, it's been really important to do lots of different creative projects. People ask me, would you go into a staff job now? And I kind of say, but my dream job is being able to pick up random projects that I get interested in. I don't know what employer would let me do that. So I have the dream job basically. But I think it's about kind of sit down and write out, what do I want to get out of this whole freelancing business? And be really kind of like blue sky thinking about it. And then just periodically remind yourself of that. And then from the practical point of view, the most important thing, I think, to start laying foundations right from the beginning is around money. So get yourself a separate bank account. There are now so many free business bank accounts. I use Starling, but Monzo has one. There's Coconut, there's Tide. There's so many of them. I think, NatWest is now even offering free ones for freelancers. I think it's called Metal. And so keep all of your finances separate. It makes your life so much easier. Whatever system you use for tracking your ingoings and outgoings, just make sure it works for you. It can be a spreadsheet, it can be bookkeeping software. I use Xero. It is what it is. I mean, I think it's fine, but find a system so that you actually keep track of, a place to keep where you make your invoices and you send them, and you can see who's paid them, you can log your expenses, all of that stuff, to start laying all of those foundations. And also, so important from the beginning to get into the mindset that there are lots of things you're going to have to do which you can't bill for. So this kind of concept of non-billable hours is something it takes a long time to understand. You can feel like, oh, I don't want to work on my admin because it's costing me time. It's sort of the time it's taking me to work on it means I can't actually do client work. Well, it is, again, this kind of goes back to that freelancing is not working without a boss. It is a business of one. And so that's basically you putting on your chief financial officer hat on and doing that side of that is your work. And you need to kind of understand that from the beginning, because there are lots of things you're going to have to do that you're not directly charging for, but are going to help you grow your business and are really, really important business functions that you have to do. And again, this also really ties back to kind of taking this a whole step back, is just fundamentally understanding that even if you are just one person doing something quite straightforward, like writing, like I do, it is still a business. And kind of my mindset is not like I'm this girl boss. My mindset is I'm a business of one. And understanding that on some days I am the boss. So that means kind of like working on my business rather than in it. Other days I am the employee, just grinding away. Other days I'm the financial officer, kind of chief financial officer, like looking at my spreadsheets and figuring out kind of like, has my tax account got enough money in it? Kind of, financial forecasting, all of this kind of stuff. And then other days it's like, I'm the head of sales and I've got to make sure that I'm marketing stuff, all of these things. So it's just really important to just have that mindset. So I think that's kind of, I know that's a lot to start with, but it always sounds more like, when you say it.
Yeah. Once you get going though, it's surprising, isn't it? How easy, all of those things that you mentioned, you kind of like go, all right, yeah. You soon found your foundation. I think that's really interesting you said about the money side. I think the money mindset altogether is a really important thing to get your head around. And again, it's part of probably getting to know yourself and building that foundation. But your relationship with money, I certainly found changed hugely from me being salaried to now having to earn. Like I saw money in a different way. What's your take on kind of money worth and how you charge and how you get going and how much you should give away for free? I think people really wrestle with that when they first get started and trying to get your head around this new world.
It's really hard, and I will be totally honest, I'm 4 years into this now and I still struggle with the fact that I just don't know how much money is going to be in my bank account every month. And what I feel like I really want to emphasize is I've never had a month where I've not been able to pay my bill. It's always been fine. It has always worked out. And actually I've earned now more than I did when I worked in house. But it's that I still really struggle with the fact that I just don't know how much is going to be in my bank account any given month. So there is that, and I think that's important to kind of just talk about, because there's so much chat about, you can freelance and you're going to make so much money and you're not going to have a care in the world and it's all going to be great working on your laptop from the side of a swimming pool. That's just not been my experience. But anyway,
those photographs give me anxiety. You see the Facebook ad and they're sort of balancing on I think, oh my God, I'd drop it in the swimming pool.
And also
stay away from the pool.
You can't see your screen in the sunlight. So I don't know what they're doing, but they're not working. Just put the laptop away and something.
Yeah, that's not happening. Yeah.
Anyway, so there is that. In terms of kind of knowing your worth, it is really hard because you are the product. Essentially, you feel like you're selling yourself. The way I try to get around this is sort of twofold. One is I try to create a distance between me and what I do, even as a creative. So my services basically are writing. I create content for the client or the customer, which, when we're talking about a magazine feature, that client is the magazine editor. I am writing something for them. And you're like, yes, that is made up of my unique expertise. And of course, me, I am part of that. But I do try to put a bit of emotional distance. And so that if I do get rejected, it's not because I'm bad or my idea is terrible. There are lots of reasons why you might get rejected. So I try to kind of create a bit of that distance. That also kind of helps with pricing as well, because then you kind of think of it as this magazine editor's not taking this on out of the goodness of their heart and because they think I'm so great and they're doing me a favor. They're giving me the commission because they need to fill the page, because otherwise they can't put out a magazine and they can't sell ad slots, and then no one's going to get paid at the magazine. So if you try to sort of think of it again in these kind of business terms, and think of it more as not necessarily transactional, but it's business. It's kind of how it works. That sort of really helps. It can be so hard to know. It's still an ongoing journey to be able to kind of do that. And, I've definitely found that the pandemic has made things so much harder because we're all struggling anyway. And so I've definitely taken rejections a lot worse than I used to do. It's almost kind of like I've spent all this time building a thick skin and suddenly it's become paper thin all of a sudden. Working for free, however, is a really, really tricky one. I try to only ever work for free based on my own terms. So I never write for free for any company that is for profit. Or to be honest, I don't think we even really would write for free for a charity unless it was honestly some local charity that I am involved in and I'm trying to help them out and I've gone to them. But then there is this other element of working for free, which is basically doing, like posting on social media, or writing a newsletter. When I first started out, I started writing a newsletter, and it took a while for me to build up an audience and actually now do make money from that newsletter because I have ads in it. I've experimented with a subscription model, so readers are paying directly for it. The newsletter does actually bring in income, but it took a while before I could do that. I had to build the audience first. And I definitely I do feel a bit of tension there because I kind of think it can be really frustrating. Like we're all told, build an audience, and then you can monetize it. And yes, you very much can. But it can be just very frustrating because it takes a while to build audiences. And part of that is creating trust and finding your niche and being able to speak with an authentic voice. And it takes a long time to find your feet doing that. And you do still need to make money alongside that. So it means you might be doing other kind of more commercial work or sort of work that's a bit more lucrative whilst you build that up. But it's really, really hard. But I do think all of it kind of comes back to something you sort of said when you were a moment ago, which is about mindset. And it's quite important to sort of understand if you're struggling to price stuff, like where is that coming from? Can you kind of interrogate what is it that you're finding so hard about pricing? Because if it's just a kind of like I have no idea where to start, and it's just a kind of like a practical problem, there are lots of books out there. I mean, I talk about pricing in my book, but there is a brilliant book by a guy called Peter Hill, who is he's an accountant and also kind of like business growth specialist. And he's got this book called Pricing for Profit. And it's literally kind of like, this is how you price stuff. And it's written for more like small business owners and kind of like larger businesses, and not written for freelancers. But the fundamentals are really, I think, important in there. And I interviewed him about it specifically for how it applies to freelancers for my book. But the point is that as far as someone like Peter Hill is concerned, is like pricing is just, there is no room for emotion in it. It's just a business function. And it's just, once you learn how to do it, it's like it's kind of like some simple maths, and like, that's it really. There's kind of nothing to be scared of. So if it's just that, books like that really help. But if it's like, oh no, actually I feel a lot of shame about money, because I have certain ideas about money, we all have ideas about money. Like, and what's really interesting to me is money in itself, much like food, is neutral. Like money is not good or bad. It's just currency. It's how our economy is set up. It's how we trade stuff, basically. But it's all of the emotions and the cultural context that we put around it that creates how we feel about it. And some of us, we have, you might, all of these kind of like sayings like money is the root of all evil, money can't buy you happiness, all of these things. We have all of these beliefs about money, and that comes from our upbringing, from our cultural environment, from, the messages we get in the media. All of these things influence that. But all they are, they're just beliefs. So it's really important to interrogate them and to understand where our own money mindset is right now, and then kind of think, where would I like it to be? Because the reality is, again, kind of going back to what you were talking about, can anyone freelance? When you work for a company, you are having one conversation about money a year max. That is your salary, basically. When you start,
if that.
Even if you work in finance and you're dealing with budgets, it's not your money, so it's not the same. And so you're not encouraged. You don't have to think about money. When you work for yourself, you are constantly thinking and talking about money. You're having to, every project you do, you have to negotiate the rate. You have to think about the rate, all of these things. You're checking your bank account all the time because you don't know how much money is coming in there. You're worrying about tax, all of these things. You're constantly thinking about money. And you're never going to be able to escape that. Even if you become super successful and you're making loads and loads and loads of money, and you hire an accountant and a bookkeeper and all of these people, it's still going to fall to you. And I also will say, I don't know, maybe this is a controversial thing to say, but I think if you fundamentally are so held back by your money beliefs, I don't think you can actually earn that. You're not going to hit that kind of level of earning because you've held yourself back from it. And I do want to stress that I completely believe that there are big structural inequalities that make it so much harder for some people to earn than others, and kind of like who we are and what our privileges are play a massive role in our earning power. And there are big wealth gaps that are driven by gender, race, age, all of these things. But there are still things that we as individuals can do to help the situation a little bit for ourselves. And I think it starts with understanding kind of like, why do we feel weird about money? So yeah, that's kind of like, this is the thing. My book is basically half of it is about money and the other half is about the emotional side of freelancing, because those really are the two things that make it so hard to work for yourself. And I think just my kind of like my absolute best and most practical tip in terms of money is actually find one person in your freelance network that you can talk openly about money with. If it's not a freelancer, it can just be someone in your world. Start with them, and then kind of find someone who also worked in this way that you can talk openly about money with. Because then you can basically start practicing these conversations. You can kind of sense check a rate when you're asked to do a piece of work. You can kind of say like, oh, this is kind of what my business is doing, and I really would like to earn whatever 10% more, and I don't know how to get there. All of these things, you can start having those kind of practice conversations. And so then when you are negotiating with a client, you're kind of like, you're so used to talking about money that it makes it a bit easier.
That's great advice. I like the thing about finding a mentor or a buddy to kind of hook in. And there's so many great groups and communities now that, people are really honest and out there, and everyone's so supportive. That was one of the things that kind of smacked me in the face after leaving corporate, because corporate is so sort of, you hold yourself back, you pretend, you kind of show face, nobody shows weakness, and then you leave and you enter this world where everyone is just very vulnerable and sharing and asking, and it's like a different world. But it's important to embrace that, isn't it, and get help and ask the questions. I've got to share with you, I love that. I wish that I'd kind of got this book when I started, because I started in completely the wrong place. When I started reading this book, it just made me laugh, because I thought my problem that I needed to solve when I started my business was I hated social media. I didn't know how to use it. I didn't use it. I wasn't it was only a couple of years ago, but I just wasn't interested. So I put myself on a really expensive social media course as the first thing. It was like the most ridiculous thing. And I thought, okay, should have read this book. But anyway, we do strange things when we're out of comfort zone. One of the things I wanted to talk to you finally, at the back of the book, there's a great piece about when it all goes wrong. And I think it really made me smile when I saw that, because I think it's so important to be very honest about that. And we fear it before we start. So we think it's going to go wrong before we even start. Then we start and we sort of have a inkling all the time things might go wrong. But I love the chapter that you put in there and some great reality of that. What's your sort of advice for people around that fear and when it all goes wrong? What do you do if you don't make the money or things happen that you feel like a failure?
So I mean, the thing is, something will go wrong, because that is life. Stuff goes wrong. And the frustration I think that so many of us have is we're just not taught to accept that you will make mistakes at work. And this goes all the way back to the education system. You're supposed to get full marks on your essay. Yeah. And then definitely in places, I know that startups, it's very trendy to fail hard and fast. But for the majority of industries, they don't want you to fail. They might say they want you to innovate and experiment, but my experience has been, you make a mistake and you get in trouble. And that, so many of us are just scared of making mistakes and of getting in trouble. The brilliant thing about working for yourself is that the only person you're going to get in trouble with really is yourself. I mean, fine, if you mess up for a client, potentially you can get in trouble with them, but really ultimately it's only ever it's you. And we all have the kind of ability to be our harshest critics. So it's just so important just to be really, really kind to yourself and just be the sort of boss that you wish you'd had, and be someone who does actually allow for mistakes to happen and just sort of knows that they will happen and that it is okay. And then when stuff does go wrong, it's really important, whether it's that you've struggling to pay your bills that month, or you've lost a client, or you've got sick, or you've messed up your taxes, or whatever it is, it all really starts with just kind of like taking a breath and assessing the situation and just kind of thinking, okay, this has happened now and I need to deal with it. And make a simple plan. Basically, more often than not, pretty much all of the things that can go wrong do require you to reach out and communicate to the person who, if you've kind of messed something up, you need to communicate to that person and tell them that you've messed up and sort of explain yourself, and offer ways to correct the situation. So, if you've messed up your taxes, honestly, the thing you have to do straight away is call Hmrc. I know it's really scary. We think like, oh God, we sort of think of the looming spectre of the tax man who's kind of here to catch us and send us to prison. If you've just made a mistake on your taxes, or you didn't understand what payment on account is because it catches pretty much all freelancers out, or you can't pay your tax bill, or whatever it is, you have to just, swallow your fear and call the number, and just talk to them, because Hmrc are not trying to just send good people. They're not trying to just sort of send good people to jail. If you can just fess up to making a mistake, they will figure out a way for you to correct it. It normally involves some kind of payment plan that is actually manageable, and maybe some fee, but more often than not, if you call them and you're upfront, you can get it waived. And actually so many people mess up their taxes because it's an easy thing to do. If it's like, oh, I'm going to miss my deadline, this happened to me this week, I'm going to miss my deadline. As soon as you know the thing is going to go wrong, tell that other person. So I had a deadline today that I realized on Wednesday I wasn't going to meet. And I did sit on it and I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to try to do it. And I was like, you know what? No, I need to tell this person straight away that this is the case, because the more notice you give people, the better. So it's about it's that kind of being able to communicate. And something that someone taught me was always offer solutions, and show your intention always needs to be that you want to fix this. And you can offer some solutions, but you can also explicitly say, what do you need from me to make this work? Or what do I need to do to kind of like make this better, or whatever it is? That can be a really kind of like powerful phrase or sort of way to show that person that this was just a mistake and you just want to correct it, basically, and that we're kind of all working towards solving this. Then a lot of the other things that can go wrong are also kind of like, money things, like you're worried about whether or not you're going to be able to, you've got a late payment, or you haven't got enough work, and all of this stuff. Again, it kind of goes back to assessing the situation. And if you need to kind of like cancel subscriptions, do that. And also, I think the other thing is once you've put that fire out, once you've kind of asked for help, or you've shuffled things around, or whatever action you've taken, it's then important to sort of reflect and think, okay, well, how can I maybe prevent this from happening again? So, maybe you've struggled to pay your bills that month. Okay, perhaps I need to start really prioritizing building up an emergency fund or some kind of cushion. Because one thing that I've definitely experienced is I've pretty much every month I bill a lot of money, and yet somehow it doesn't come into my bank account because of late payments, delays, all of these things. So I know now, 4 years in, that I have an account that's basically a kind of like a cushion account, so that it sort of bridges those situations where the money is supposed to come in, it just hasn't arrived yet. And there are just really simple ways that you can just start building that up. Put a couple of pounds every week into another account, or again, use one of these apps that rounds your money up for you, and just start taking those steps to sort of prevent these things from happening again. Or, if you're struggling to kind of bring work in, it's also important to assess what kind of patterns are emerging. I know, for example, that certain months are just a lot quieter than others. So now that again, of course, like if you're starting out, it's a different story, but now that I'm 4 years in, I know that in certain months, I just don't really get much work. So in the months that are really busy, I try to kind of prioritize putting extra money aside. There's something called a hills and valley account. So basically, when you are making a lot of money, when you're at the top of the hill, you sort of put it aside for when you're at the bottom of the hill and the valley, and that it sort of tries to even out those sort of ups and downs. But it all basically starts with taking a breath, making a plan, asking for help, and then doing a bit more planning about what lessons have I learned and how can I sort of protect myself in the future.
I love that hills and valley. That's brilliant, isn't it? And because sometimes you have such a good month and you think, oh, flying, and the temptation is just to go wild, but no. Thank you, Anna. That's brilliant. What I want to say, I mean, there's a few people watching and I think, yeah, go buy the book. Yes, definitely. It's like a manual. What's coming up for you next? What's next in Anna's world?
So the project I'm working on right now is a awards for freelance writers. So the Freelance Writing Awards, actually just announced it yesterday with my brilliant freelance pal and kind of like mischief maker, Sian Meads-Williams. Sian is brilliant and she's been freelancing a lot longer than I have, and she writes this fantastic newsletter called Freelance Writing Jobs, which is she basically sends out all of the calls and pitches and all of the writing jobs that are going for freelancers. And she's got this brilliant newsletter and we're pals. And one of our frustrations is that it's prohibitive for freelancers to enter the big media awards. So there's either an entry fee or actually you can't enter as a freelancer. And so we've kind of put together the first UK media award that is just for freelancers, because freelancers make such a big chunk of the media industry and their work doesn't get celebrated. And it is really important to kind of celebrate your work and also get awards, because you need them as part of your sort of like portfolio building. And so that's going to be coming up in the next couple of months, and I'm really excited about it because it just feels like a very joyful project to be working on, and it's nice to celebrate something for once, especially in the media world. But that's kind of what I'm working on at the moment.
I love that. And you're right, you've got to have fun with this. That's such an important part of starting out on your own. As you said, we've gone through the money side, we've gone through the foundations, things are going to go wrong, but you've got to try and get fun out of it and create something that you're going to really enjoy. I love those awards. That's brilliant. I'll look out for that. Thank you so much for coming on. That's been brilliant. I'll put all of the links in the show notes. I think that we've promoted the book, You're the Business. It's out now, although it took Amazon, weirdly, about 4 days to get this to me, which is really odd. Like, it's so odd now. We kind of want everything the next day, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's there, it's on Amazon, it'll drop into your door and then you can get started on your business. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, let me just do that. Thank you, Anna, that was brilliant.
Thanks so much for having me.
I love those awards, that sounds amazing.
Really excited about it. So fingers crossed, it all kind of like, it's nice to work on something with a friend as well, so
that sounds brilliant. Thank you. I know you're a busy lady, so I shall bid you a great Friday and weekend.
Thanks very much. You too.
Thanks, Anna.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.